Peace be to you. No one is born an atheist, as no one is born a skeptic. That is to say, one who doubts the possibility of ever discovering truth. These attitudes are made, and they are made less by the way one thinks than by the way one lives. We do not live as we think. We soon begin to think as we live. We suit our philosophy to our actions. That is bad.
Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, for 1 year as we learn from Venerable Fulton Sheen, one of the greatest Catholic teachers in modern times. Join me, Amy Thomas, once a week for a short reading out of Bishop Sheen's book, Way to Inner Peace. Hello, Catholic pilgrims, and welcome to week 49. So this means that we only have 10 readings left in our Bishop Sheen book. And so season 3 is coming right around the corner. And I would like to take this time to quickly share with you what we're going to read for season 3 and who we're going to be reading from. So I have decided to pick St. Teresa of Avila. And we are going to read her book, The Interior Castle. The reason I picked her is, for one, I like to switch back and forth between a man and a woman. And so this next year is going to be a female saint. But St. Teresa of Avila has just popped up everywhere in my life this year. People have been mentioning her. I have read a lot from her. It just seems as if she's picking me, and I have to pay attention to that. I know a lot of people really want me to read St. Therese of Lisieux, and I will probably get around to reading The Little Way, but I have to pick who is picking me, and I feel very strongly that this year it's St. Teresa of Avila. And so when season 3 starts, that's what we are going to be reading. It's a dense book. I already have it. I've been looking into it, and I'm a little intimidated, I guess you could say, but I'm also very excited because the deeper things are, the more we're going to get out of them. Back to this week, though. Our topic this week is where character is made. And I just want to jump right in because I have a lot to say on the other side. Our 3 key points are freedom, consciousness, and ownership. Number 49. Where character is made. Hardly anyone today challenges the view that character is made by outside or external influences, such as home background, schooling, poverty, or wealth, the propaganda to which an individual was subjected, and the neighborhood in which he was raised. This view could lead to the destruction of responsibility if carried to extremes, and responsibility, it must not be forgotten, is the mark of freedom. Environmental influences only condition, but they do not cause character. Our Lord put his finger on the cause when he said, "From the heart come wicked thoughts, murder, adultery, fornication, theft, false witness, and blasphemy. These things are what make a person unclean." Matthew 15:19. Modern psychology emphasizes the importance of the subconscious, but the Divine Master stresses rather the conscious factor of the intellect and will. That is, our knowledge and our decisions. The combination of these two is sometimes called the heart, and from them comes our character, as from the tree comes its fruit. The heart is the mint wherein the coinage of human life is stamped. It is the anvil which forges habits and routines. It is the stick which pilots the plane of life. Sir Walter Scott once said to his son-in-law Lockhart, "We shall never learn to feel and respect our own calling and destiny until we have taught ourselves to consider everything as moonshine compared with the education of the heart. The reform of outward conduct and environment is essential, and it is to this that much civil law is ordained. But it really only deals with the effects and not with the causes. Social reformation is only superficial. It is like cutting off the tops of the weeds while the roots are left in the ground. Much social reform attempts to cure problems such as crime and juvenile delinquency by changing environment, such as building more dance halls and swimming pools. One of the difficulties social reform must always face is that it hardly ever goes into operation until things have gotten very bad. As long as the people are not aroused to abuses or evil, they will not support social legislation. It must be remembered that all crimes against society are founded on false and wicked ideas, and until these are altered, society will not be altered. A lion is not gentle once it is behind a cage. A wild horse is not less ill-tempered because of a bridle and kicking stirrups put on it. Only in a limited sense is it true that circumstances make us who we are. They do so only to the extent that we permit them to form us. It is not so much the outward that influences the inward as the inward that influences the outward. If the reservoir is to be kept clean, all the streams that pour into it must be pure. Evil has its roots in the heart. As a man thinks in his heart, so he is. Proverbs 23:7. The stalactite pillars to be found in caves give a perfect example of how habits are formed by thoughts. Water on the surface of the earth sinks through the soil and the rocks, carrying with it a tiny sediment. These drops fall from the ceiling of a cave to the floor, but as they fall, they form an icicle, and little by little the deposit grows into a stone pillar. In like manner, if the thoughts and desires and wishes of the heart carry with them a deposit of our decisions and our thoughts, and if these are evil, it will not be long until they build strong pillars of evil habits on the outside. The opposite is true when the thoughts are good thoughts and are holy and pure. It is the things that we like that make our character. Life is stained only because the heart is impure. Thoughts are the eggs of words, and when the will gives motive power to evil thoughts, they become actual transgressions. No man would be believed who, holding a bucket of muddy water in his hand, said that he drew it from a spring that was crystal clear. The heart is the center of life, the throne where manhood sits and rules. The subconscious holds the thoughts and the desires that have been discarded, or else the reflections and desires of the heart that have passed into action. Evil is not a robber that breaks into our house. It is a tenant to whom the house has been rented. But, on the contrary, if we keep our hearts clean and godlike on the inside, we will change our environment. So my middle daughter is in her senior year of high school, and as you know, I homeschool my kids, and so we've been doing American government this year, and we've been reading through the Constitution, we've been reading the Founding Fathers' words, we've read through the Bill of Rights, we've read the Federalist Papers, we've read some of the Anti-Federalist Papers. We've just been spending a lot of time reading about the founding of our country. And obviously one thing that the Founding Fathers were very keyed in on was liberty and freedom. And a lot of Americans today would say that this is the land of the free, mostly, and that what makes us so great is that we are a free country. But as we've been going through her curriculum and reading the different things, it's very clear that what our Founding Fathers regarded as freedom is very different than what we regard freedom as today. The Founding Fathers saw freedom as living a virtuous life, living a moral and virtuous life, having that ability, that capacity to choose the good, basically. And that's what the Catholic Church teaches us. Freedom, true freedom, is the ability to choose the good. Now, especially in our current environment, freedom is misconstrued with license. And what is license? Well, that's just being able to pick between bad and good. But that's not freedom. License is, I just want to do whatever I want to do. I don't want anybody to tell me no. I don't want anybody to hamper me in my decisions in any way. I just want to do what I want to do. And a lot of people think that that's freedom, but it's not. Why would freedom be the ability to choose evil, or the possibility to choose evil? Why would we even want that option? It just makes no sense. But that's what a lot of people want. They just want the ability to choose to do whatever comes into their head. But what we know is that if you have the ability to choose the bad, you're not really free, because then you become a slave to your sin and to vices, and it hurts other people, thereby restricting their freedom. Because typically when you do something that's bad, somebody else is going to get hurt in the process, and so they aren't able to be free, truly free. And a lot of people think, well, if I'm only hurting myself, then I should be free to do that. But when are you ever only hurting yourself? Never. Because everybody is a daughter or son of parents. Most people are siblings. Most people have family members that are emotionally hurt when people choose to do bad things. So you're never just hurting yourself. And why would that be something that you want to do? But this is where character is formed. Character is formed when we choose true freedom, not license. Because if we just give ourselves over to evil, we're not really free, and we're going to have a bad character. Now, most people would say that they don't have a bad character. But there was a time in my life when I really did have a bad character. I mean, there were good parts about me. There were. But I was choosing bad things because I thought I had the right to do them. Or honestly, because I thought that those things would make me happy. And no one was going to tell me otherwise. And so because I thought that way, I started to act that way. And I acted on my thoughts that were in my head. That I should be able to do this, nobody should tell me no. And so it was forming a really bad character in me. And, there are people in my family who would probably argue with that. They're like, oh no, Amy, you've never been a bad person. But I know the thoughts that were in my head. I know things that I have done. And it's not good. It's not good character. I did not have a good character. Now, why did I have a bad character with some good shining parts in me? Well, because I'd had some bad things happen. And we talked about that before in earlier podcasts. I had 2 abusive boyfriends. My life was kind of spiraling downwards. I had turned my back on God. And I had this victim mentality. Now, rightfully so. I was a victim of some crimes, some very heinous crimes. And because of that, I chose to allow those things to dictate my life. I allowed those crimes to cause me to turn my back on God. I allowed those crimes to sink me deeper into immoral sexual activity. I allowed those crimes to send me on a path to drinking as a means of escape. And so I was kind of letting myself off the hook and not taking responsibility for my actions after the bad things had happened, but instead saying, well, these bad things happened. And so, I I basically have permission to act however I want. But that was not the right answer. It wasn't the right answer at all. And after the fact, the choices that I made after the fact of the terrible crimes that were committed against me are some of the things that almost hurt me more, because I chose to do them. Because I was living in this pity party. And again, rightfully so, I was a victim. I needed to acknowledge that. And yes, crimes were committed against me. But I was never going to become better living in that victim mentality world where I took zero responsibility for anything. And I was very fragile. And I could get mad at people in an instant. I mean, anything could set me off. Because I wasn't happy with myself. I wasn't happy with the choices that I was making. I wasn't happy with the direction of my life. I did not have God at the forefront guiding me. I had told him to step aside. I was going to do this on my own. And I thought that was where real freedom was going to be found. And I thought that by going out on my own way and choosing my own path, that I was really free. I was making the decisions now. But that wasn't true. It was just license. I was just choosing between good and evil. And I was many times choosing the bad. I really was. And it was forming my character. And Bishop Sheen says something that really hits me in the heart. He said, "Only in a limited sense, it is true that circumstances make us who we are. They do so only to the extent that we permit them to form us." And man, was that true for my life. Yes, I had bad things happen. And in a way, those bad things, sort of do form me. I carry those scars around. And those scars make me a little harsh in certain ways. I'm not innocent in any way. It's hard to explain, but those circumstances did form me a little bit. But it was after the fact that I permitted them to continue forming me. And like I said, that's what bothers me the most, truly and honestly, is because I made the decision to allow them to continue to form my life. And he says, "It is not so much the outward that influences the inward as the inward that influences the outward." And understandably, I had really bad thoughts going on in my head after the fact, but I continued to allow those bad thoughts to then shape my life. And no good came of it, honestly. It wasn't until I decided to take some responsibility for how things had turned out after the fact. And once I did that, things started to turn around, slowly started to turn around. People will often ask me if I could go back and change things and not have those crimes happen to me, would I? And, it would be silly of me to say, "Oh, no way. I would never change those things." Yeah, I mean, I would, in one sense. I would change them because nobody wants horrible things to happen to them. But, and it's a big but, my character was formed and forged during the low points and the high points. I was taken very low. And God, in his almighty understanding of things, he knows why those things were permitted to happen. I don't fully understand it. Maybe I just have the type of personality that needed to be brought low. Not everybody needs to be brought low in order to have a good character or a really good relationship with Christ. I don't think anybody needs to go seeking to be brought low in order to have those things. But I do think there are some people in this world that, I don't know, maybe just their character has to be formed in the fire, I guess. I don't know for sure. I've thought about this many times over the years, and I think it's a big reason why saints like St. Augustine and St. Paul and St. Teresa of Avila really speak to me, because they have low moments where they're forged and their character is forged. And that just speaks to me, maybe because I can relate to that. Thankfully, I found a way to get my life back on track. And I would say today, that I have a good character. It's almost like there are two me's, really. I look back on the person that I was when I did have a very bad character, and it seems like another person. It seems like a lifetime ago that I was her. And I do love her, that me, that was going through all those struggles. I had to find my way. I had to learn that I cannot do life without God. I had to learn to be dependent upon Him. And I had to learn to get back on the narrow path of life, because I didn't like having a bad character. It didn't feel good. And so I had to learn to get back on the right path and try to live out the virtues and try to be a moral human being. And that took some time. It did take some time. The biggest healing I found was when I had my first confession, when I converted. It was like the floodgates opened. And all those things that had been pent up inside of me for years and years, I just let it all come out. And it was incredibly healing. And then, when I went on to counsel victims of sexual and domestic violence, this was something that I tried to teach them. Because what a lot of people want to do is, when something bad happens to them, they want to stay stuck in the victim mentality. And what happens when we stay stuck in the victim mentality is we take zero responsibility for anything that happens after the horrible bad thing has happened. And we give ourselves excuses to just do whatever, because, something really bad happened to me, and so, I can't help the way I act. No, that's incorrect. I would always tell my clients, okay, we're going to talk about the really bad thing that happened to you. But we're not going to go over that again and again and again. We're going to get it out. Yes, it happened to you. We're going to acknowledge that. We're going to acknowledge that you are a victim of a crime or many crimes. But I'm concerned about where you are today. What is going on in your life today? And how do we get you to a place of really thriving in this life? And so many people did not want to go there with me. And the reason why is because they wanted to continue to use that victim status in order to be able to do anything they wanted and just get away with it and have that permission. I mean, we see that in our culture today. If you can play a victim card, you get off the hook for anything. You get tons and tons of pity, and it's not that we shouldn't pity people who have been through tough things, but all you got to do is play the victim card, and you can do whatever you want. You can be nasty, you can be full of rage, you can be hateful, you can be lazy, and nobody's allowed to say anything to you. And there's no self-reflection. None at all. There's no responsibility taken. It's all everybody else's fault. And that's where bad character is made. That is where bad character is made. And I know this. And it's It's something that was really frustrating to me when I was counseling people, because I had been where they were at the present moment. And I knew that continuing on that path was never going to satisfy them. They were never going to become who God created them to be. But they wanted to stay there because it was a little comfortable. Got them off the hook. And the crazy thing is that they just weren't happy with themselves. More than anybody else, they weren't happy with themselves. And that's what I wanted to help them see, because I know and I knew what that felt like. Again, like I said, you don't have to go through something really bad in order to build good character in your life. You absolutely do not have to go through trials, terrible trials and tribulations. I mean, we're all going to have our own sufferings and we're all going to have our trials, but I mean like devastating trials. You don't have to go through that in order to build good character. Because the reality is we live in a secular world. We live in a fallen world. Everywhere you turn, there are temptations everywhere, especially with regards to sexual morality or immorality, I guess you would say. There's temptations everywhere. There's temptations to cheat. There's temptations to lie. There's temptations to steal in some capacity. There's temptations to hate people. I mean, it's everywhere. So it's not as if, if you haven't had something devastating happen to you, that, it's so easy to build good character. No, it's not easy, because the world actually just does not want you to build good character within yourself. And so we have to be very conscious of what we're doing in our lives. And we've talked about this before in previous podcasts. There has to be some silence in your life in order for you to self-reflect on the state of your soul. We just cannot do it with noise all the time. And we have to take ownership of our sins and where we're falling short. And that's why we have to get ourselves to confession. And we have to acknowledge that we are not perfect people, that there is always room for improvement. And we have to live our lives in a true spirit of freedom. Meaning, we have to always choose the good. Yes, of course, we'll mess up, and sometimes we'll get it wrong and not be intending to. But our intention should always be to choose the good, not the bad, because we will not be free there, and we will not build a good character. And it's in that moment when there's the temptation to choose the bad, or, choose between bad and good. But it's in that moment when you reject the bad and you choose the good, even if it's really hard, that character is truly formed. Good character is truly formed. And we are called as Catholic pilgrims to have good character. So let's make sure that we are working on that in our lives. So that is all for this week, Catholic pilgrims. I will see you back here for week 50. And until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.